my name is Caesar.
Hey everyone. So I play live shows, and sometimes I play with artists that have their own lighting setups. This is something that I've seen a few times on the road or locally when I'm playing shows. So for example, I recently played at a festival in Seattle, and one of the co-headliners of the festival was a band called Health. Health had these moving strobe lights that would occasionally change colors and things like this, and compared to a lot of the other bands that were also on the bill that did not have anything like that, the Health performance was 10 times better. Not just because the music was awesome and everything and they had great stage presence, but because the show visuals were super rad. Really blinding, powerful looking lights, like really syncopated with the music. So it made me want to do something like that. I'm really into stick lights, so I really like the lights that are kind of like poles and they have LEDs and things like this, and so I decided to kind of shop around and look for things. There are a number of different kind of like solid, like super dense colored like LED pole lights, but they're like $5,000 for like a pack of 4 or something like that. Something that's out of my budget, right? For what it's worth, I've heard that larger touring acts actually rent their lighting for the duration of the tour, but I needed something that I wanted to be able to bring with me and program and have a more permanent solution. So looking around, I found a product called Freedomsticks by Chauvet. I'm not sure like how popular they are or like what kind of longevity they have in terms of like, you know, like whether or not they're going to keep making them or not, but seemed like the right solution. It was in my price range. So if you're not familiar with the Chauvet Freedomsticks, basically I want to say they're probably like 5 feet tall. They have a series of LED lights on them. They're wireless. They connect and transmit over DeFi only. There's no DMX plug-ins at all. No input jacks. And they are rechargeable, and they have like a 5 to 6 hour battery life. Sounds pretty awesome, right? And so when you buy a pack of 4 of those, it comes with the charger, the case, the stands, and it's like $700. Far off from the $5,000 from some of the other tube light solutions. Obviously, they're very different in the way that they look. The tube light ones that are like $5,000 are like almost like these like really dense, like solid kind of panels of color that kind of move around and have lots of interesting design effects. The Chauvet Freedomsticks are like LED nodes that basically can do like kind of motion, or they have like a variety of different types of settings and presets and things like this, and they can also take DMX. Now once I purchased the Freedomsticks and they arrived at my house, I set them up and I were looking through them and trying to understand how they worked. Basically there's a few things to know. First thing is that they connect only over DeFi, which means that like if you have any kind of wireless transmitter, like the plug type things, you have things like this. Unless these things operate and transmit over DeFi, they're not going to work. I was fiddling with this all day long, and then I ended up sending an email to Chauvet, and they just told me straight up, no, this is not going to work. It needs to be a DeFi enabled transmitter. Okay, good to know. So in the Chauvet line, they have similar things to that are actually DeFi compatible. They also have this product, which is called the D-FI Hub. This thing is the recommended solution. Basically, they have like 3 different tiers. They have the little transmitter guys like that. They have the D-FI Hub, and then they have one above that, which is a longer range version of that, and it has like additional functionalities in it. It's like cell phone enabled or something. So I went with the D-FI Hub. Next thing is that I needed a way to get the signal from my computer to the D-FI Hub, so that way the D-FI Hub could transmit over to the Freedomsticks. So previously I used to use LightKey to basically program a bunch of different lighting presets, and then take those lighting presets and you know, program them along to like Ableton backing tracks, and then send that out to my wired DMX lighting, right? Like the par lights on a rack, like that kind of thing. But this was going to be different because I needed to be able to wire it into this thing, so that way it could go wirelessly. So I had a few different options. Either I connect my laptop to USB and then USB to an interface of some kind. So for instance, this is like a cheap USB to DMX interface. It's the Intech Open DMX USB. So I used this for like previous tours, but that meant that the laptop had to be physically USB connected to this thing, and then this thing had to have a 5-pin to a 3-pin converter, and then that thing goes into the lights or into the transmitter, right? My goal this time around is to basically get everything disconnected from my computer so that way I can leave my ports open for more important things. Just as an aside, when I play live, I have a wireless guitar system and a wireless IEM system. If you're new to the wireless guitar situation, a lot of the product offerings out there in the market actually operate on 2.4 gigahertz. So this is basically like a Wi-Fi signal, and 2.4 is like the main channels for most Wi-Fis out there, excluding like 5G signals. And so what happens is that when there are signals nearby that are also operating within the same bandwidth range or whatever, like they basically start colliding, and signal loss occurs or data packet loss occurs, and therefore you get this kind of like sputtering, dropping out effect where the signal's unclean. So essentially what would happen is I would be like on stage playing my guitar, and because of like some kind of like wireless interference somewhere in the 2.4 gigahertz range, my guitar would be like cutting out. And that's really stressful when you're playing a show because you feel like you can't physically go far away from your wireless transmitter. So after doing a bunch of research on that, I learned that basically the typical way that routers work is that they will look for like the best trafficked channel. So basically inside of Wi-Fi routers, there's like multiple different channels that they can operate on within that gigahertz range, and it will select the one that is the freest. So let's say you're in an apartment building, you have a bunch of different like Wi-Fi signals around, and a bunch of the channels are cluttered with other Wi-Fi. It'll find the one that's like the least trafficked, and it will land on that. That's like a default automatic channel surfing behavior. Most routers though actually have a manual mode where you can select a channel. Didn't know this, but what's really good about this is that if you can select a channel, and that means that your wireless guitar, which is also doing the same thing, it's also transmitting over 2.4 gigahertz, it's also channel surfing, looking for the best optimum open channel. If you manually set each one to a different channel, then that means they will never collide with each other. And so this is essentially the way to solve the interference problem if your router is on 2.4. Just to note, the other reason why I have this router is because I use a wireless in-ear monitor system with a Behringer X32 rack. And the X32 rack has a digital mixer software that you can control all of the band members' IEM routing. And then I connect over Wi-Fi with that 5G signal to the X32 Edit, which is a software, a piece of software that lives on my laptop and on our cell phones. And so at any given time, I can just open up my laptop as long as my laptop is on the network, and it will just start like reading from X32, and I can make edits to the levels and fix my in-ear monitor levels if I want. So really important, kind of crucial centerpiece of the in-ear monitor system and the wireless guitar system is just like having a good router setup. And so I ended up just getting one of those little travel routers that had multiple Ethernet ports in it. And so if you're not aware, when you have a router and it's not actually connected to like the broader internet, like via a modem or something, what it acts as is a local area network, meaning that it creates its own signal. It creates a signal, it has like a Wi-Fi name that you get it, and then anything that you plug into it is basically within that network, and so that thing is now transmitting over Wi-Fi, and then anything connected to that is now also connected to that Wi-Fi network, but it's not connected to the internet. So this is actually what a lot of bands do when they're setting up their in-ear monitor rigs, or they're setting up their wireless guitar rigs, or they're setting up whatever that needs to connect over Ethernet. Let's plug into that router. The good thing is that I found a travel router that has a 5G option, right? And what you want to be able to do is basically have the configurability to switch on or off the 5G or the 2.4 gigahertz. And so by switching off 2.4 and actually just hardline like sticking to the 5G, I basically in effect not only like solved the channel surfing problem or the clutter problem, and I like straight up just like avoid that range of bandwidth altogether. And so now my guitar and my router signal peacefully coexist. It's like super awesome. So the question that I was asking myself is it possible to actually use that router also to control the D-FI enabled Freedom Sticks? I was looking around, and some people do not recommend doing essentially DMX over Wi-Fi from the computer to the hub, because there's the potential for basically like overloading the network with like too much data, and then it can cause everything to crap out. As I was looking into that, there are multiple protocols that deal with Ethernet. One of them is called ArtNet, and the other one is called sACN. Apparently, and I was just kind of reading about this, apparently that the ArtNet does not have essentially like the software redundancy to like deal with lost packets or retries or anything like that, and so it can be a little bit more faulty. The sACN, from what I've read, is essentially a more mature version of that does handle data packet loss and retries, and basically like handles the issues of scale more elegantly, and it also is Ethernet enabled. So what I did was I looked for different Ethernet enabled DMX interface that could connect Ethernet to DMX cable, and it was sACN compatible, because I wanted to use that in particular to like get the benefits of sACN over ArtNet. So I found this, which is the DMX AN2 by Chauvet. Thanks, Chauvet. You have a lot of cool stuff. So basically what this is it's a powered interface that you plug in an Ethernet cable, a Cat6 cable, and then on the other end you have just two DMX outs. So basically you have two different universes on separate DMXs. It has a little LED indicator to show if it's getting signal and all of that. Really great. So what I did was I basically took an Ethernet cable out of my 5G wireless, and I wired that thing directly into that AN2, and opened up LightKey and configured my universe to operate over sACN, and I had it all like physically wired up, and that was able to successfully connect. And so what I did just for testing is I took an actual set of par lights and I physically wired them to the AN2. With that, I was able to basically ensure that that component was working properly. Once I had all of that working, I grabbed the D-FI Hub and I plugged that into the output of the AN2. So now it was 5G wireless over Ethernet cable to the DMX AN2, and then DMX into the D-FI Hub. And again, that thing also has channel selection, because you have to be able to select the least cluttered channel if you don't want to do automatic channel surfing. So once I had that, now the D-FI Hub is running, and voila, I was able to actually just create profiles inside of LightKey, and that controlled the Freedom Sticks perfectly. It was great. So now, that was basically a solved problem. So all I had to do is basically open my laptop, flip on my rolling rack case for my live shows, flip on the power. That would start broadcasting the Wi-Fi over 5G. It would automatically connect and start running the X32 rack mixer through LAN. And then as long as I had my laptop connected to that same network, which was the user 5G Wi-Fi, it would automatically connect to that network. And so now I had access to my lights, I had access to my mixer, I could play my wireless guitar without it like interfering, and boom, we're ready to go. Now, the next problem to solve is DMX programming. So when you're doing DMX programming, you have a variety of different pieces of software that are industry standards that people will use to basically create presets and create, sets of cues and sequences of things that are happening. And the purpose of this is so that way you can essentially you can go into something like Ableton or whatever your sequencer of choice is, and you can essentially program your light show in MIDI and then send that MIDI as an external source into your DMX program. So in this case, what I did was I had LightKey, I created presets and different looks, and then I essentially wanted to draw those into sections of each song on Ableton for my backing tracks, and then have LightKey listen for those notes. And as the MIDI notes are coming into LightKey, it would essentially trigger the different looks and the different, dimmer effects and all of that stuff. Awesome. So, a few things to note about LightKey. So LightKey has, by default, an Ableton bindings feature called Live Bindings. The Live Bindings feature on LightKey is automatically set to channel 16, and so if you want to do your own bindings and override that, then you have to do it with your own profile, with your own bindings on channel 15 or some other channel, you decide. And it will create user presets inside of Ableton that you're basically meant to like drag and drop and like, shorten the little clips. The next thing you know, you're kind of like pencil drawn in all of your show. For me, I cannot do that. It doesn't make sense for me because I want to have like a really interactive feeling lighting show. And so what I did instead was I created mappings on a different MIDI channel. So what I did was I set up all of those things on this. And my intention was to basically hit play in Ableton, hit record, and then just perform the light show. And then my hope was that after I was done performing the light show, I would be able to then go back and just hit play. And now the lights would operate exactly the way that I wanted them to. This was actually really annoying and difficult because I kept having problems with the bindings. All of this stuff I just told you about, the channels and the mappings and all this, basically, long story short, I couldn't figure it out. I emailed LightKey and they explained to me that like that feature for the live bindings was not meant for like live playing and recording and playback. And so they explained that, hey, if you want to do this yourself with actual performance and recording, you got to choose the different channel, you got to set up your own bindings, you got to just basically rough it and do it all yourself. Okay, fine. So after I did the thing that I said I did, which was creating looks, dimmer effects, and novelty effects, and like a master dimmer on channel 15, I went into Ableton and I hit record, and I went song by song and actually performed the light show. I hit record. And what that did was that recorded all the button presses, it recorded all of the knob turns as automation, and all of that was recorded on MIDI channel 15. And then I went into LightKey and I set all those mappings specifically to listen to channel 15 MIDI, and I had a mapping for every single type of button that I was touching, and it worked beautifully, actually. So I was able to go and perform it, hit record, and just play back, and it worked just fine. So now I'm gonna actually turn on some lights and I'm gonna show you what that looked like when I have my keyboard plugged into it. Okay. I'm gonna open up LightKey. It connects to the Wi-Fi, that my live concert Wi-Fi, which is the user Wi-Fi 5G. So now I'm connected to it. I've connected my MIDI controller. Got that right here. Okay, so what I've done here is I've created a bunch of different lighting setups. So basically each one of these is like a solid color. And then I've created a bunch of dimmer effects, which are like just overriding the amount of light. So a dimmer basically is not color, but rather like whether the light is on or off and what intensity percentage, right? And so by doing this, I could control basically the color, and then I can override the color with the dimmer pattern, right? So if I wanted a red strobe versus a green strobe, I don't have to have two separate presets. I basically can just choose all my colors, and then I can choose all my dimmer effects. That's the first thing. The second thing is that when you have multiple items like this, and you have basically 512 channels of DMX or whatever, like basically you can address each one of these things on a different DMX channel. And so now, if I want, I can create fanned effects or like gradient effects, because it will look at the lighting in totality across the entire set of devices, because each device has its own address, right? So all you got to do is like basically create like a green to purple light preset, and you select all of the fixtures that you want in that, and because they're all addressed separately, like it'll just figure it out. And like I save that as a preset now, and so like I can basically choose like what the color is, right? The next thing is that after I created all of those, I went into LightKey and I dragged all of them onto the live stage right here. So if you're not familiar with LightKey, basically there's a function called live. This is basically like, if you didn't have a MIDI mapped controller right here, you could just do it on the screen. When you drag boxes and put them up alongside each other like this, they become toggles, as in like no two buttons can be enabled at the same time because they're connected. So like, boom. So that means like when I click the activate on a particular color, no matter what it used to be, it will always override that and change to the new ones, which is what we want. The next thing is after I created all of those, I went into the mapping and I basically just tapped each button to sort of make it show up on the list, and then I would assign it to each color. For live playback, I basically organized these buttons in kind of a rainbow. So like all my solid colors are at the top, so it's like red, green, blue, white, and then as you go down the squares on the trigger pad, it would basically be like lighter colors or darker colors version of that, or like gradients relating to that color. So I might have like an orange red or like a blue green or something, right? Next thing I did was I mapped each one of these black keys to one of the dimmer effects. And so once I did that, I was then able to basically say light, like make a flashing white light, or I can do like a fade in, or I can go, you know, strobe, whatever. I can make it solid again. I can make it pulse to the beat. Right? So all of these things now makes it super playable. So then what I did is that I went into Ableton and I dragged all my clips onto the stage here, and I literally just went to like the beginning of each song and I hit play and I started just performing the music while hitting record. And what it did was it recorded all of the different MIDI on to the stage with all the automations and all the key presses. I then set the channel output to 15 because that's where I was mapping them to. All of these are listening for MIDI on channel 15 for those particular buttons. And so now, whatever I play in here on channel 15, I can also have it play back on channel 15, and it's as if I'm playing it live. It's like the LightKey doesn't see it any differently because it's just listening on channel 15. And so now what we get is I can do cool, so for instance, on this introduction, I wanted kind of sparkles. And so I'm doing the drip effect, and then I'm programming strobes and movement, right? So I'm like basically choosing sparkle as the underlying color, and then I'm doing like the dimmer effects to each thing. And get ready for it. And done, done. 2, 3, and boom. And so I could like override these things with strobes if I wanted to, right? All of this is now playable like it was an instrument. So I did this for every single song, and then after I was done with each one, I went to export MIDI, and I made it so that way I could literally save each song MIDI in a particular way, so that way I could always come back to it and bring it into new projects. So that's basically how I did it. And so like just kind of giving you a demonstration. So if I wanted to like, let's say I was just hitting play on something. Activate. So I'm going to give you a demonstration of what this looks like. So I'm going to hit play. So I'm going to start with white, solid. I want to be like yellow. Bright light. Red, purple, whatever. Now I want a strobe. Strobe. Then I'm going to go back to white with a beat pulse. So as you can see, like now there's a lot of room for interpretation and performance and all of that, and as long as you kind of familiar with like where you've mapped everything, like now you actually have a pretty good fighting chance of having a good set. So here's basically a previous one that I did, enable activate clip. So like here's, so now this is just playing back what I did on another day. Boom, that's how I did wireless enabled DMX lights over Ethernet into a D-FI Hub, into the wireless Freedomsticks by Chauvet, MIDI mapped over DMX after recording it from a live lighting performance. That sounded like a mouthful, and it took a lot of work and effort, and it was super annoying to figure it all out, but I hope this helps you, and have a good day.
My name is Caesar.